This is Join Us in France, episode 270. Bonjour, I'm Annie Sargent, and on this episode of Join Us in France, I talk with Scott Toporek about his trip to the Dordogne and the Aveyron with his fiancé Grant. And those are two neighboring areas in Occitanie in the southwest of France. And since that's home for me, it's a pleasure to report that they had a great time. They visited Sarlat, Roque Gageac, Beynac, Saint-Cirq-Lapopie, Belcastel, Najac, Toulouse and Carcassonne. But we don't talk about Toulouse and Carcassonne hardly at all in this episode. Those were busy days and well-planned out days. Scott shared some great accommodations and restaurant recommendations, and to see them in writing, head on over to the show notes for this episode, joinusinfrance.com/270. That's the number 270. And speaking of the show notes, Maris on the Facebook group posted this about the website. Wow, Annie, I've been listening to podcasts for a long time and have been enjoying this page on Facebook for almost 2 years, but only today did I go to your website, searched episode 257 for the name of the little museum that in Paris that I could make out. And voila, there it was. Your search engine is formidable. Merci bien. It was Musée des Arts Forains. Je suis si heureuse. Well, see, you just have to just go to the website. I do everything I can to make this site as useful as possible for you, those of you who are planning a trip to France. You can see the names of the towns, the restaurants, the links to the accommodations that my guests recommend, and it's searchable. So check it out. You'll be glad you did. Bonjour, Scott, and welcome to Join Us in France.
Bonjour, Annie. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited to talk with you and tell everybody about our trip.
Yes. So you're a Francophile. You've been to France 5 or 6 times already. You've explored some of the less traveled parts of the country, which I love because so many people just go to Paris again and again and again. So it's great that you ventured out. And so today we'll talk about a trip you took starting in, well, your trip was longer than this. We're just concentrating on Bordeaux, then a drive to the Dordogne, to Sarlat, making your way around several beautiful places in the Dordogne, and then going east towards Rodez, which is in Occitanie, and ending in Toulouse. So it's like, from Bordeaux to Toulouse, but you took the long way.
Yeah, we took the scenic route.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Do you speak French? What attracted you to the podcast and to France in general?
I've been listening to the podcast now for just under a year now. I remember I was actually planning for this trip, and I think I was looking for something specific about Saint-Cirq-Lapopie. And I don't know, I was really surprised to see that there was actually a podcast that talked about it. And then from there, I just really got hooked. You know, I started with that episode, and I think I've more or less burned my way through almost all of them by now, believe it or not. But yeah, I love France. I studied a little bit of French in high school, and then from there, I try to brush up on it from time to time. I think each time I go to France, it gets a little bit better. At least I hope it gets a little bit better.
Yeah.
But yeah, we really love to visit France. I think that, for me, it has everything you want in vacation. Great food and wine and so much history and culture. And I think that's what really keeps me coming back time and time again.
That's great. So when you come to France, what do you end up doing mostly? Like, are you somebody who hikes a lot, or somebody who likes to visit museums or castles or something? What's your thing?
Well, I think, kind of a bit of a combination of it all. I live in Los Angeles, which is a very big city, very urban. And so I think that, when I come to France, part of what I like to see is the history, the medieval castles and, just experiencing, the architecture that we don't really have here in the United States. And so it's a combination of, I think exploring old castles, maybe one or two museums. I really like going out to eat and then dining in the restaurants, and then, a little bit of hiking and walking around villages. So I think that it's a combination of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's still a vacation, so I try to keep it relaxing.
Typically, do you stay in hotels or do you rent apartments, or how do you do this?
Usually a combination, so I think this trip we did mostly Airbnbs, but typically, might do a hotel or two on a trip, really depends on what's available. If there's a hotel that I really love in a town, that's where we're going to stay. And if it's, I happen to find like that special Airbnb, well, then that's it.
Right. So do you like to settle in for 2 or 3 nights and then branch out from there? Or are you the type of person who moves on every night?
Typically, at least 2 or 3 nights. I like to have at least, one spot where we're there maybe 5 or 6 days.
Yeah.
And in this trip, that was Sarlat. But yeah, I think that it's good to have a home base so you don't feel too rushed when you're moving around.
Wonderful. Okay. Last generic question I'm going to ask you is you rented a car and you got your car at the airport in Bordeaux. So I assume you flew in from Paris.
Yeah, we did.
Okay. That's weird. Nobody flies to Bordeaux. People take the train to Bordeaux.
I think I must have just looked and they were pretty cheap tickets.
Okay.
But yeah, I think I must have Googled train time and flight time, and I guess flight time was maybe a little shorter, so I think that's probably, or maybe the times worked out better, something like that. Yeah, because it's funny because most people take the TGV to Bordeaux and they fly to Toulouse, which is silly because it's about the same distance, but whatever. Well, good to know for next time.
Yeah, that's all right. I'm just giving you a hard time for no reason because it's fine. Either one is fine. It's really a personal choice. Okay, so tell us about Bordeaux a little bit, and what did you stay in Bordeaux at all?
No, I think I would have loved to stay in Bordeaux, but when I was planning this trip originally, most of it was planned around Sarlat in the Dordogne and in Belcastel in the Aveyron. So when I was originally planning the trip, the idea was that we would come into Bordeaux and maybe spend half the day there prior to kind of heading out to more of the countryside area.
Okay. All right. Yeah, so you were done with Paris. You just wanted to head out to the country.
Yeah, we were ready for those wide open spaces. And Bordeaux, I still think that, we only spent half a day there, of course. And unfortunately, it was raining, or it started to rain, as we were walking around.
Yeah.
So I didn't get to spend as much time there as I would have liked. The other reason is that when we were getting our car from the airport, the lady at the counter, she tried to give me this SUV type car, and that's not what I had requested. I wanted a smaller, more compact car. I had learned from prior trips, having a big car in these small villages is sometimes more of a liability. So it took a while. It took me probably an extra hour there at the car rental place just to make sure that we got the car switched out. So by the time we got into Bordeaux, it was a little bit later than I planned. But we had a really great lunch there, though. It was this restaurant called, I'm trying to remember now. I have it in the notes here.
La Tupina, yeah.
La Tupina. And the cool thing about this restaurant is that they have, in the middle of the restaurant, when you first walk in, they have an open fire. And they have the chef who's there, and he cooks, all of the food. Well, not all of it, but a good portion of the food right there over the open fire. Throws the fries into the duck fat and carves the meat there. So people were ordering these big steaks at lunch, and he was cooking it right there over the open flame.
Wow!
And we had a table that was right next to the fire there. So it to me was something that this is the thing you go to vacation for. You never see a restaurant here with an open fire in the middle of it. So it was great, really, really good, I think, introduction to the region's cuisine. I had like a big, duck confit and a huge slab of foie gras. Filled me up really well for the day. And then we walked around. After that, we walked around Bordeaux for a little bit, visited, a couple of the places in the city there. But as I said, it was raining, so it ended up being a little bit rushed.
Right. So give us an idea of the price range for this restaurant, because more or less.
I would say that they have like a lot of restaurants there. They have like a prefix type menu, so that way, I think that's what I got actually, because it included the appetizer, the entree, and then a dessert. And then my fiancé, who didn't really want all three, just ordered an entree. So I think that probably for the two of us, with drinks and everything, maybe about €100.
Yeah, okay.
So it wasn't too bad.
Right. That's what I was guessing, is like with foie gras and some wine and whatever, it'd be about 50 per person. So that's about right. Okay, just wanted to give an indication, because people, when they hear all this, they might think, oh, this is like a fancy restaurant. But, not necessarily.
No, it definitely was more of like it was nice, but it had that more country flair. And it really was. I'm glad we both didn't get a tasting menu, because when you get the foie gras appetizer, here in the U.S. you might get a little tiny cut of it. It's like a whole slab.
Yeah.
It could have fed like 5 or 6 people, and it was just my portion. So I'm glad I had someone to share it with.
That's good. Okay, another thing I want to mention before we move on about the car rental thing. What happens is that in French people's mind, an SUV is the American car, right? So they want to give you the SUV because to them, that's doing you a favor. It's a nice free upgrade. Like Americans want SUVs, right? Well, they don't realize that they've been driving their whole lives in these small villages, and so to us, you go a little slower, but we're used to the size of the roads. But to Americans, it might be smarter. If you don't need the SUV, you were right. Don't take it.
Yeah, absolutely. I learned the hard way in Provence, so I insisted this time around.
Yeah, and Provence is even tighter, I think, than Dordogne is. There's always sticky situations if you try to drive into medieval villages, then you'll always find yourself stuck somewhere. So it's best to just, park and walk, because they're not that big. I mean, honestly, you don't need to drive all the way to the main event. Anyway, so from Bordeaux, you didn't sleep in Bordeaux that night. You moved on to Sarlat, or you spent one night?
No, we moved on to Sarlat, and it's not too bad of a drive. I think it was probably one of the longest legs of the drive in our trip. So I think it took maybe about an hour and a half to 2 hours.
So did you take the small roads, or did you take the freeway?
It was the freeway for a good part of it. Okay. Although I just put the directions into Google Maps and took it wherever they told me to go.
Yeah. Yeah, you probably went north a little bit on the A89 and then down to Sarlat, I would assume. Okay, so tell us about Sarlat. You spent several days there.
Yes, I absolutely love Sarlat, and part of it was, of course, listening to your podcast and just imagining being there in this almost perfectly preserved Renaissance style town. So I was really happy because by the time we got to Sarlat, the rain actually had let up. So, when we were there, arriving, it was, blue skies again, and everything was, glistening clean from the rain. Mm-hmm. But
I didn't ask you. I didn't ask you what time of year you were here. Like what year and what month?
Yeah, we came late May. So basically last couple of weeks of May.
In 2019.
2019, yeah.
Okay, sorry. So the rain had cleared.
Yeah, and then we checked into our place that we were staying there in Sarlat, which was, I found it on Airbnb, but it's actually more of almost like a B&B type of place, because the owners have several units inside this building that they rent out, And this one was, I think, probably one of the most beautiful Airbnbs that I've ever stayed in. Because in Sarlat, you have all of those, those beautiful stone houses in that like creamy limestone color. So this is one of those houses that was just off the main square. And the original building was, I think 13th century. And then they had done like a big renovation in the 18th century so that the entire interior was that kind of, Victorian type, style. So it had this like contrast of a very medieval or, Renaissance exterior with a more 18th century interior. But it was absolutely gorgeous. And the person who owned it was great because, right away he gave us recommendations for local restaurants. He had a nice plate of strawberries, some of the Mar de Bois, which I had never tasted those before. And now I think strawberries are completely ruined for me because they really, it's nothing like the strawberries that you buy here in the U.S., especially in the supermarket.
Well, these strawberries, especially in Sarlat, and Sarlat is just a couple of hours north from where I live. So in this whole area, we have beautiful strawberries in season. And then the rest of the year, you don't find them because they're not worth it. They're just not worth it. So, so if I want strawberries in the winter, I'll buy frozen strawberries and put yogurt on them or something. But, that's not like, the really, really good strawberries are in season. So May is great. And then there's usually a second season in September as well.
Yes, I was just, there's very few times that I feel like I'm like, wow, this is really much, much better than what we have. But those strawberries were definitely one of them. Yeah. So it was a great introduction to Sarlat, and we arrived there on a Sunday night, so it was a little bit sleepy there. And I started to get a little worried because I called around to a few restaurants looking for a reservation, and like everyone was telling me that they were full. I was like, oh no, what are we going to do? But I think by the time I got to the fourth or fifth one, they had some opening there because that was a night I didn't really plan for anything in particular.
So what is it like in your experience calling those restaurants to make a reservation? How does it go?
Well, in general, it's not too much of a problem. I speak enough French that I can at least get by on a reservation. Yeah. So I didn't have too much trouble, except for a place that I was calling, actually the restaurant in Belcastel where we went to, where I called to make the reservation. Everything was going what I thought was pretty well in my French until she started to ask me for my address. And then I was really confused because, like, why does she want my address? And so I had to end up switching to English, and it turns out she wanted my email address, not my home address. So, I mean, I can get by so well until something throws me off script, and then I have to regroup.
Yeah. Okay, but nobody. I mean, like they didn't switch to English because Dordogne isn't famous for. I mean, there's people who speak English. There's lots of English natives that live there, but they didn't try to switch to English or whatever. They just spoke French with you.
No, they spoke French with me. I mean, in Paris, people will switch to English very quickly, but not in Dordogne, not in Toulouse. This is probably the most I've had to really speak French on any of my prior trips, I think. Yeah. Okay, very good. Which was good. It was great. I loved it.
Yeah, that's what you want, yeah. If that's what you want, it's good. If you don't speak any French, it can be a little complicated.
It can be, but even when I had to switch to English for that one address issue, the woman on the phone spoke English, so it actually turned out fine. Yeah.
So this Airbnb that you liked so much, I will put the address, the link in the show notes for people. Of course, like all things Airbnb, sometimes they're available one year and not the next, or they won't show because for whatever reason. So,
Right, and I think they have like 4 or 5 different apartments that they rent because they live on the very top floor. So all of the like the 2-3 floors below it, they rent out. So I know that they have a lot of different options there.
Okay.
But yeah, that was very nice, and we
Good
enjoyed that a lot.
So then you explored some more of Sarlat the next day?
Yeah. So, I think that first full day there in Sarlat, we just decided to stay there in town. So, had like a very, slept in that day, a very nice leisurely lunch. At that point, I was getting pretty full of foie gras and duck confit. So I think I had just like a very wonderful salad, a very fresh salad, lots of vegetables, which was nice to break it up a little bit.
Yeah.
And we went to right there in the middle of the square. They have, I guess it's an old, I don't know what you would call them. Are they just like a townhouse or a mansion? At any rate, it's called the Manoir de Gruisson.
Okay, that is a manoir. That's what we call it. Manoir.
It's a manoir. Okay,
yes,
okay, that's what it's called. And I guess it used to be the home of one of the wealthiest families in Sarlat for many, many years. And I think the family or somebody still owns it, but they've converted most of it to almost like a museum. So you can go in there and they have like, all the different rooms of the house kind of preserved as it would have been, 100 or 200 years ago. And I think that if you're the type of person who just, likes to wander around and kind of, explore an old house like that, it's really interesting, especially because a lot of these places, they might have a room set up in an old style, but then they have it like roped off. So you can kind of peek your head in, and then that's it. But these rooms you can go into. You're probably not supposed to touch everything, but if you really wanted to, I suppose you can. There's nobody watching you. There's no ropes. And it was just filled with all these different sort of, what I would call curiosities, So it was a simple way to kind of spend the afternoon, but it was nice that we didn't have to leave town. And I think that's part of the charm of Sarlat as well, is that, you can just walk around town and explore it, and there's no big museum or single attraction that you have to kind of zero in on while you're there.
Yeah, I'm going to try and talk Elise into writing a voice map tour for Sarlat, because she's guided people so many times there that she could probably do it in her sleep, and it would be interesting to have a tour that takes you around the town and tells you a little bit about what you're looking at, because that's always the problem is, when you're exploring like this on your own, well, sometimes you find out what you're looking at, but sometimes you don't. You're like, wow, this is cool, but I don't know what it is.
No, yeah, you're right. Absolutely. We actually listened to your guys' episode on our drive from Bordeaux to Sarlat as kind of a preparation.
Right.
But you're right. Yeah, once you're actually there, to actually know what you're looking at would be great. Because we where we stayed at, because it was right in the old town, there would be tour groups walking by, the apartment where we were at. So it would be nice, to have some more direction there.
Yeah. Very good. So the next day, did you leave Sarlat or did you stay in town?
Yeah, well, we branched down a little bit because, as you know, it's really close to Beynac, and actually, we didn't go all the way to Beynac. We went to Roque Gageac, which is a really close drive. I think maybe 15 minutes.
Yeah,
and just a beautiful little town right there on the Dordogne. And I think you guys have talked about this place as well, where it has kind of an almost little microclimate there, because it's kind of in this almost cove area. So supposedly, this is what they said there, it's warmer than the other villages there. And they have these palm trees planted in the village as well, which seems a little out of place, but it's interesting enough. A bit of trivia, I suppose.
Yeah, you can grow palm trees. My neighbor has his backyard looks like California. He's got big old palm trees and a big pool, and it's weird. I walk in there, I'm like, looks like California at your house. It's weird.
Yeah, so maybe works in like Nice. I don't know how much in in the Dordogne, but it's a cute little town, and that's actually where we hopped on one of the tourist boats.
Yep.
What are they called?
The Gabard Norbert. Yeah. Norbert.
I had really wanted to go canoeing on the Dordogne. That was kind of the original plan.
Yeah.
But I think it was still a little too chilly that time of year. And plus it was kind of off and off raining that day. So I didn't want to risk it by getting into canoe. And for what it's worth, I didn't really see anybody out in the river canoeing that day.
Yeah.
So I think probably if that's something that somebody really wants to do, maybe a little bit later in the summer, I think might be more typical.
I just want to mention that at Roque Gageac, right outside of the town, you can also hire an air balloon. There's a company that will take you up on an air balloon to look at everything from above. And it's lovely, but it's not year-round because the Dordogne is this funny place where it's really, really busy with visitors, probably May through middle of October, and then everything shuts down. You know, the restaurants close, all the places that rent the canoes, all of that is shut down. So you have to time it right and if the weather's not great, you know, we're Southern French people. If the weather's not great, we stay home. We don't do anything.
Right. I think I looked at those hot air balloons too, and I know that those also are like a little dependent on the weather.
Oh, definitely.
So I think if someone really wants to do that, you know, I recommend booking it early in your trip if you're going to be there a few days. So that way, if it ends up getting canceled the first or second day you're there, you can rebook it for at some later point.
Yeah, because they keep an eye on the weather all the time, so they can tell you, oh, you're here for 2 days, come back on Monday or whatever, because the weather should be good. You know, they know this.
But yeah, that was the boat ride on the river was lovely as well. We actually somehow, I don't know how, but we got mixed in with a German tourist group, I guess. So the audio that they played on the boat was all in German.
Oh, great.
Yeah, go figure, in France, right? But then we had our own headset that was in English.
Okay.
And the guide there actually spoke French and English. So
good.
We were able to appreciate everything that was going on.
That's good.
And after that, we went back to Roque Gageac, and then we decided to drive from there to Beynac to visit the castle. So I think that some people, if you wanted to, you could get off at the boat or you could canoe down there. But we thought it would be easier just that if we did the boat ride there in Roque Gageac and then drove to Beynac, so that way we're not kind of watching the schedule of like the boats or like when there's a pickup or something like that. It kind of freed up our afternoon to take it slow.
Yeah, that's good. I like your style of traveling. You're not running around doing a million things. You're doing enough to be interesting, but taking it easy. That's good.
Yeah, and you know, Beynac was a great place to really explore too, because you know, once we got there, it is quite a hike up all the way to the hill to the castle. Yeah,
you have to take it slow.
You have to take it slow, unless I guess you're in really good shape.
Yeah.
But that had, I think, one of the most impressive views, you know, because especially once you get up to the top of the castle there, you're really looking over the whole river valley, and you could see the other sort of, you know, castles off in the distance. I think it's Castelnau, is that the one?
Castelnau, yes.
That you can kind of see.
Yeah.
And that was, you know, I think a beautiful view. And we ended that afternoon after we had hiked up the castle, walked back down to the village. We just sat there in one of the cafes by the river, you know, had a glass or two of wine. And that was a really nice end to the afternoon there of exploring around the river.
Cool. And then you cooked in your apartment. Was the setup for cooking pretty good where you were renting in Sarlat?
It was. Well, the kitchen was a little small, but it had absolutely everything that you needed. And I think that in our prior trips to France and in this one, I usually find it's fun to cook at least one night while we're there, because that gave us the opportunity to go to the little local poissonnerie and go to the market and buy the fresh vegetables.
Yeah.
So that's part of, I think, the real fun of being there, especially in these, small towns, to kind of go to the different, markets and pick out your food for yourself.
Looks like you made homemade aioli. That's good. You're good.
We did, although we make it, we made it before, and, you usually need a good mortar and pestle.
Yeah.
Which they had almost everything in that kitchen but a mortar and pestle. So we still were able to make it, and it still turned out very good, but it took a little bit of maneuvering.
That's good. All right, let's move on to the following day.
So the following day, that was actually the Wednesday morning market in Sarlat, which people say is the smaller of the two market days, but it did not seem small to me at all.
Yeah, it's about the same.
Yeah, if someone is I think worried about, picking, which day to go to the market, the Wednesday market, I think, has everything that you would, hope for. Yeah. And it was still lots of people there.
Right. People sometimes make distinctions that are without any importance. They will tell you, Saturday one is bigger. Well, it's bigger by 3 people. It won't make any difference. I've been there on both market days, and they're both very nice.
Yeah, I think that maybe Sarlat is pretty touristy, so I feel like, and they're really known for their market days.
Yeah.
So I think that's why, Wednesday, I think, you would have a great time. And, and there's so much of the local products that they're selling there. I picked up some walnut oil, bought a delicious walnut tart.
Oh, yeah, those are good.
Bought lots of strawberries.
So you got both Marat des Bois and Garriguette, which are the two big local strawberries.
Yeah, and the owner of the Airbnb we're staying at was telling me that the woman at the market who sells the strawberries, she owns the farm, and it's her and her son who are like the ones who are growing and picking the strawberries and selling them. Mm-hmm. And so that was,
nice.
I think a nice little, story behind the people who are growing your strawberries.
It's cool. Very good.
But yeah, so that was I think, that was our last full day there, or our last day there in Sarlat, because after that we decided to drive and make our way towards Belcastel, which is in the Aveyron, and because Saint-Cirq-Lapopie, it's kind of on the way. I think we had to maybe take a slight little detour, but really didn't add much to our trip, like maybe an extra 10-15 minutes.
Oh, maybe more than that.
Maybe, yeah, but it was worth it, though.
Yeah. It's fine, but I drove it not that long ago. It's a good 45 minutes, I would say, but it's okay. It's fine.
Yeah, and I think it also helps break up the trip too, because if we would have gone directly from Sarlat to Belcastel, probably it would have been, I think, closer to 2 hours.
Yes.
But instead, we had maybe about 45 minutes to an hour to Saint-Cirq-Lapopie, and then another 45 minutes hour to Belcastel.
Right.
So it broke up the drive nicely.
So right here, you changed region. You were in Dordogne, and now you're in the Aveyron, which is also another gorgeous part of France, with fewer tourists, if anything. You can tell me if that was the case, but there are more visitors in Sarlat than in Belcastel.
Yeah, definitely. And, even so when we went to Saint-Cirq-Lapopie, which, is a beautiful drive because you're going to the countryside, and it's a very rugged terrain, especially as you're getting to the village there. As you're driving up, you can, just as you're going into the village, you can see it up there perched on top of the cliffs. Mm-hmm. And even though I know it could be a little bit touristy, that day that we were there, it really wasn't at all. So this is late May. So we didn't feel that the town was overly crowded. I didn't see any buses or anything like that there.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful place just to kind of, wander around and explore the village. And we had a nice little lunch there before we ended up, as I said, moving on to Belcastel, where we were at for the next couple of nights.
Oh, so you stayed in Belcastel for a couple of nights. How nice.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
So you have a tip there that I like. You want to tell us about your tip?
Oh no, yeah. So I've had such good success plugging in my directions into Google Maps, and in particular, like I'll actually pin where the parking lot is in a village, so that way instead of driving into the middle, I go straight to where the parking lot is just on the outside. So I did the same thing on our way to Belcastel. And I don't know, I think it's Google Maps' fault, but for some reason, as we were getting right close into the village, we turned off the main road, and we're driving through the smaller road. And, at some point, it looks like I'm driving into someone's farmhouse, and I'm like, okay, well, sometimes in France, these roads are really tiny, and so I saw this old little French couple, they're kind of looking at us quizzically, and I'm like, okay, well, I guess kept going on this road, and all of a sudden, it's like a dead end. and there's like literally just the piece of hazard tape where like it goes down to a cliff, and I don't know when they closed off this road, but they didn't update Google Maps, and so at that point I was kind of in like an area where it was all overgrown by like tall grass, and the couple who has the farm, their dogs ran after our car, and so. They looked like nice enough dogs, but they were still barking. And so I'm trying to, like, back out.
Without running over the dogs.
Without running over the dogs. And this rental car that we had is the kind that, like, beeps at you whenever anything's close.
Yes.
So all of the grass was setting off the beeper, so it sounded like the car was going to explode. I was like, oh, my gosh, what did I do? I should have known better.
Yeah, Google Maps, they want you to take the fastest route, don't they? And so sometimes they send you places that just isn't right. So if it looks too narrow or like a dirt road or something, just keep going. It'll recalculate.
Yeah, so I mean, as I said, like if it looks like you're driving through somebody's farm, you probably are. In which case, maybe look for something that's a little bit more direct. At least don't wait until you're all the way at the end of the road.
Yeah.
But yeah, once we got there, it was we had a really great stay in Belcastel. They have like in the chateau, which is at the top of the village, kind of at the top of the hill there.
That's another walk, right?
Well, since we stayed there, we were able to park right by the chateau.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So at least when we first got there, we didn't have much of a walk.
Yeah.
But they have like one of the towers there that you can rent and stay in. It's not really, most of the castle there has like a art museum into it, but we stayed there at the suite. So during the day, like people were coming to the museum, but then at night, you pretty much had the whole chateau to yourself, which was really cool. That was just. I mean, you've been to Belcastel.
Yes.
It's the most beautiful village.
Yes. It's beautiful. And the chateau's nice. And I bet the suites are lovely in there. I mean, I walked past them as a visitor of the castle, but I didn't stay there. It looks really nice.
Yeah, I mean, you have that feel of staying in a castle, but you still have a little bit of the modern amenities. So you can have a nice warm shower and... internet and all those other sort of things. Yeah.
So were the owners there? Because the owners are American.
Right. So the owners are American, but they have like a caretaker there. Her name is Izzy. She lives like locally there. So she kind of takes care of the museum part of the chateau and checks people in. And she was so delightful. I mean, she really made our stay there extra comfortable. And
good. She seems like a nice person. She seems like a very nice person.
Was.
Yeah.
And then
we had walked up, and so I was so relieved when I saw that they sold water there. They had a fridge with water, so I got 3 bottles, and she says, "Well, drink one." I downed the bottle like nothing. She was like, "Oh, maybe you do need 3." She was funny. She kept teasing me, and I heard her speak English. Her English was good.
Her English is very good.
Yeah.
She lived in the UK for several years.
Okay.
And I think she has a daughter who lives in the UK still and is married to a British guy. So yeah, her English was really easy to talk with her.
So you didn't have dinner in the chateau. You had dinner across the little the little river or whatever it's called. Yeah.
Right, yeah, because the chateau itself is, I said, mostly an art museum, but then they have like that. Just there's really only one room you can rent into the whole chateau.
Okay.
But yeah, down at the end, down at the bottom of the village, right by the river, there's a restaurant, and there's also another hotel down there too that has like more rooms where you could stay. And the restaurant's called Vieux Pont, which just means old bridge.
It's right by the Vieux Pont, yeah.
And it's actually like a Michelin-rated restaurant. And
is it?
And it's actually, I think, one of the few Michelin-starred restaurants in France that have a female chef, kind of heading it. Nicole Fage-Gauthier, I think is her name. And it's her and her sister who run the restaurant. Her sister kind of runs the head of the house, and Nicole is the chef. And the building where the restaurant is actually in the home that they grew up in. So they converted that home into a restaurant space. And it was, for me, the best restaurant that we had while we were in France this trip. And it was, the food was very good without being overly pretentious. I remember when we showed up there, I was like, this village is so small. Are we going to be the only people in here? But no, the entire place filled up that evening.
Oh, yeah,
it
was
fills up, pretty surprising that people obviously are coming from all over to eat here.
Yeah, and they have this nice terrace where you can sleep. You can eat outside if the weather permits.
Right on the other side of the river there, and I think there's that's the hotel part where people can also stay. Cool.
Yeah. Oh, that's because I had lunch there, but it wasn't memorable. The lunch, but we didn't pay very much for it. We probably had one of these 12, 13 euro lunches, nothing to write home about.
Well, there's a different restaurant that's actually right on the river there called Cheyenne.
Okay.
And that one is not like it's more like just your regular cafe food.
Okay.
I think they're like salads and things like that.
Okay. Then I did not eat at the one you were mentioning at the Vieux Pont. Okay.
But yeah, we spent another day there in Belcastel. We took like the audio guide tour of the village, and there's also like an old ruined castle that's about a 15-20 minute walk from the village called Fort du Roque d'Anglars. And it's again one of those things that in France, I guess ruined castles are everywhere.
Yeah.
So we walked down there, and we're the only people on the road there, and we're the only people at the little castle site. And there's no sign saying you can't do this, you can't do that. You can wander all around it, and it had this very beautiful, magical, I think quality to it, where it's just sitting there in the middle of the forest overlooking the river.
How cool.
And it's definitely one of those sites where there's not a lot of people coming and going, but still kind of has that really special magical feel.
Very cool. Okay, we have to hurry up because we've been gabbing too long. Tell us a little bit about Najac. Belcastel is lovely.
Oh, yeah.
And if people want more details, I'll put your guest notes on. They can read what you wrote. But Najac.
So Najac was a place that I had looked up before we went there, and I knew I wanted to see it. It's another one of those places that, as you're driving into the village, has this, beautiful, imposing castle kind of perched on the top of a hill in the middle of a valley, kind of surrounded by the village. The village is built along the ridge, along the crest of the mountain, with the castle up on the top.
Yep.
So it's really breathtaking when you see it,
because
it
impressive.
has almost it's like a cinematic type feel as you're driving into the village.
Well, the Aveyron is cinematic because of all the hills, all the rolling fields, all the cows. They have cows everywhere.
They do, yeah. And I think, I could have easily spent, a full week or two there because there were so many other places on my list. Like I wanted to go to Conques. We didn't go to Conques. There's
Conques is very nice. Yeah, and you didn't go to. There's a couple places you should have gone that you didn't.
I know. So that's why I think next time a week.
Yeah, Estaing's another one. But they have so many most beautiful villages right around Rodez. They have probably 10 of them. And they're about an hour drive away from Rodez. So you could either stay at one of those chateaus or, there's plenty of places to stay in those villages. But you could also, be in Rodez and branch out to go see all these things.
Right. And I think that, as he said, there's so many day trips that you can do in that area. And Najac I would definitely put really high up there because I wish actually we had more time to spend there. Another tip for people, especially if you're just planning a day trip, a lot of these smaller villages, the tourist offices close between noon and 2.
Yeah.
So, we had kind of planned on, having lunch there and walking around, but if you want to get into the tourist office, get a map or get some more information, you kind of have to plan around their lunch schedule beforehand.
Yep.
Same thing, the chateau. The chateau was closed for those 2 hours. So
they because they don't have droves of tourists, so they have to be reasonable. They hire one person to open and close, but they go to lunch. I mean, obviously.
Yeah. So. But still, it was a really nice place to stop.
And you also stayed in Najac.
Well, no, we actually just did a half day there, and then from there we drove all the way to Toulouse, where we spent the last few days of our trip.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We're not going to get to talk about Toulouse because we went on too long. But there will be the Airbnb in Toulouse. That you liked and your notes about Toulouse, but it's like the stuff, the normal stuff. You did the normal stuff, and Elise is tomorrow. She's coming home. She's coming to visit me, and we're going to start on her voice map tour of Toulouse, which I'm very excited about because, again, she knows Toulouse like the back of my hand.
She knows so much, yeah.
Yeah. The other day I was walking around the city with my brother and my sister, all three of us from Toulouse, born and raised, and I was like, around this place, I wouldn't know how to do a tour because I've never done it. I've never had to. I mean, this is
I'm
home.
Sure you could.
I could, but this is home. I have never thought of, what would I talk about here? It's to me, it's home. It's not something I talk about. It's kind of weird, but anyway. All right. Well, thank you so much. I hope I let you talk about enough of the stuff we had planned to talk about. I'm sorry to cut it short, but I really need to try and keep those episodes within, a reasonable time. Otherwise, everybody falls asleep. Thank you so much, Scott. You have been delightful.
It was great talking to you. Yeah.
And who knows? Maybe you'll do another exciting trip, and we can talk about it at some other point.
Yes, I hope to come back very soon.
Okay, merci.
Merci, Annie.
Au revoir.
Au revoir.
This week, since this is one of those episodes that I'm producing before I head out to Paris, and as this airs, I am in Paris, I want to thank all of my Patreon supporters who make it possible for me to keep doing this work. And not only that, but patrons enjoy several rewards that you'll find listed at patreon.com/join us. Patreon, join us, no spaces or dashes. I share exclusive content with my patrons, including help with your French comprehension, stories about France, photos, membership into a secret Facebook group, and anything and everything that I can think of that I think would be helpful for my patrons. And this week, since I'm in Paris, I'm sharing photos of my trip. And of course, patrons can message me directly through Patreon, and those messages always have top priority. And if you're not sure your itinerary for France is as good as it needs to be, let me review it for you. It'll cost you $50, but you'll get a full review. We go through the whole thing on the phone, and I send you my recommendations in writing. Email Annie@joinusinfrance.com to set that up, or you could do that through Patreon as well. And just make sure it's clear that you want an itinerary view. Can I say that? Itinerary review. And if you'd like to support the show without spending a penny you wouldn't have otherwise, before you go shopping on Amazon or on booking.com, go to the bottom of any page on Join Us in France, click on that Amazon or booking ad, and because you came to those sites through me, I get a small commission, and that pays the bills for this podcast. Thank you so much. So no personal update this week other than I'm in Paris and I'm hoping that it's going to be good weather. I don't know for a fact, but I'm hoping. It's February though. Let's be reasonable. February in Paris is usually rainy and cold, so I'll be prepared for that. And remember, lots of people don't think to look for a podcast to help them plan their trip to France, so tell them about it. They'll find Join Us in France anywhere they find their podcasts, including Spotify, Pandora, Apple Podcasts, and much more. If they don't listen to podcasts yet, kindly point them to the website, to joinusinfrance.com, and there they can both listen and read. Send questions or feedback to Annie@joinusinfrance.com. Have a great week of trip planning, a wonderful time in France, and I'll talk to you next week. Au revoir. The Join Us in France travel podcast is written and produced by Annie Sargent and copyright 2020 by Addicted to France. It is released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license.